All right, you're watching at 7:30. Who knows? You're watching at midnight. You know.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Yeah, rumor is we had a primary day today. I got to tell you, I'm always chastising people on the radio about, think before you vote and know the rules. And what did I do today? I threw my card in the machine and I went, "You're an idiot. You're an idiot." Coughed it back up. I'm having a conversation with a neighbor while I'm voting, and I'm drawing lines for delegates for Kasich. I'm like, I wonder if that's going to be heck with it. Put it in, rejected. So they put me in the idiot folder. And then I went back and got my second ballot, embarrassed, and only shows a couple. So a bunch of delegates got screwed because I was embarrassed. Anyway, how are you? Welcome to my state of mind. That's my state of mind. What can I tell you? I was embarrassed. The delegate count is not as important. A delegate vote is not as important as a delegate count. And of course, you are actually voting for delegates assigned, and you're getting a civics lesson, I hope, on primaries and general elections and the difference between the two. No rundown tonight because I have stars here. I have news journalist stars, Dan McGowan, who is the guru of Providence, and Ted Nesi, who's the guru of business, finance, and politics, both of whom I cannot live without in my daily life, producing talk shows, are both here. So let's just start with a couple of headlines. Of course, we don't have results yet, but here's the New York Times. And, so we got a big roll here now. And here's a second headline that says, by the way, there's a lot more of you people who don't want to be in a party than want to be in a party. Unfortunately, too many of you don't know how to get in and out of a party. We'll talk about that. And here was my favorite piece of video from yesterday's extravaganza.
You look at Kasich, I don't think he knows what, did you see him? He has a news conference all the time when he's eating. I have never seen a human being eat in such a disgusting fashion. I'm always telling my young son, Barron, I'm saying, and I always with my kids, all of them, I'd say, children, small little bites, small. This guy takes a pancake and he's shoving it in his mouth. It's disgusting. Do you want that for your president? I don't think so.
Oh, no, I want you for president.
You should say Teddy.
Yeah, I was thinking off the top.
That's a whole new throw everything out, Jess. I want to hear about this.
I was thinking off the top, taking a second ballot was actually very Rhode Island of you in many ways at your polling place.
Well, unfortunately, the first one got thrown in the idiot pile, which I think gets incinerated. Ted Nesi, Dan McGowan, thank you, fellas, for coming in. Did you, you're going to opine a lot less than me in this category, but you look at that and you say what?
It was an extraordinary, I was there, I covered the Trump rally yesterday, and it was an extraordinary thing. I mean, it's not like anything in politics I've covered otherwise. I went to all four over the weekend, Kasich, Hillary, Bernie, and then Trump, and I was saying to some folks in the newsroom yesterday that if the Bernie rally was like a folk festival, the Trump rally felt like a rock concert, maybe toward the end when the mosh pit comes up. I mean, people were so riled up, fired up, yelling and everything, and he's that's what he goes for, and he brings it. And he, you can absolutely see the appeal, the entertainment factor of Donald Trump, the take no prisoners thing. And as I talked to voters after, they said they trust the guy. They think he's the only one who can get something done, the only one who's not bought and paid for. I mean, they were absolutely adamant.
Yeah, I know the speech.
It's because you hear it every day. I was just going to say, I was listening to you on the radio just this morning, and I think you said, or this afternoon, you said something like, people are really excited just to be excited. We're seeing that in Rhode Island right now.
Well, excitement is one thing. Reverence is another thing. And I don't think in my entire adult life, and I don't know how many elections, my first presidential election would be 1980, I believe.
Abe Lincoln.
I've never, I'll ignore that. I've never felt a reverence for a candidate. And I think anytime there's a reverence, an adoration, there's the word cult, people don't like it. If it doesn't assign to you, then don't wear it. But there are a lot of folks who are just in this thing in such an all psychological investment in fashion that they're not listening to garbage like that. I mean, that is a disgrace, in my opinion, that Kasich takedown was as much a mockery of his own presidential candidacy as John Kasich. John Kasich is an everyday guy who might have got caught from at some diner eating pancakes. But really, Donald? I mean, really? And people ignore that stuff and react the way they did to you is just something I've never seen in my lifetime.
Well, isn't it like what Ted was kind of just saying? I mean, people have never seen anything like it, and I think for a lot of people, it's sort of refreshing, right? Even remember a couple of years ago.
Or going to the circus.
Well, it's certainly no question. When you go back a couple of years ago to the Tea Party sort of movement, people were still there on message about what they wanted to say. They weren't quite. You weren't quite hearing the sort of insults lobbed at people the way Donald Trump does. I think people really. I mean, you hear it every day.
I also think when I was walking around, because I wanted to talk to as many Trump voters as I could, because I do think it's very easy for everyone to caricature them. It's actually, you're in a better position than we are in some ways, because you get calls all day, you hear from folks, and so it was interesting to me that it's almost like there was a different Donald Trump depending on which voter I talked to. Some of them said, oh, well, we don't like how he insults people and stuff. Something's supposed to be the core of his appeal. They said, well, we wish he'd stop that, but, and they went to what they liked. Others said, good, he should be saying these things, these people are liars, etc. And the other thing that really stuck out to me was the overlap between his message and Bernie Sanders' message as their rally. They're different in a million ways, Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. But boy, the two of them zeroed in and hammered the loss of manufacturing jobs in Rhode Island as well as other, and people are livid with that. And it's interesting because it's coming at the same time. We're finally seeing studies nationally by economists who say, oh, sorry guys, you were right about NAFTA and stuff, we were wrong. It is really hard for communities to bounce back after their jobs are gone. We said you'd bounce back pretty easy, that doesn't happen. And you got regular folks at things at the Bernie rally, at the Trump rally saying, yep, that's what we thought was going to happen when you took all these factories out of our towns.
To your point, I think there's an unusual amount of common ground between two guys who are perceived to be on polar opposites of the political spectrum. And I think the answer to that is that Donald Trump is not on the polar conservative opposite spectrum.
I'd agree with that.
But the rhetoric gives, for some reason, there's a connection to this concept of conservatism and tough talk, and it doesn't fly. Look at John Kasich and the way he comports himself. Jess, if you could throw us the first John Kasich piece of audio from Saturday at Bryant's.
So at the end of the day, folks, we have to fight for our survival, but we can control this. We don't need to look inside. We don't need to close our doors and our windows. We're going to be fine. And to the young people who are here, no one's looking for sainthood. I'm certainly not, okay? But I say to you, high hopes, eyes on the horizon, change the world, confidence in yourself, and your life has meaning. And follow your heart and your brain and live your life to the fullest. I got to go. I hope I'll get your vote. Thank you all very much.
Now the charge is he's establishment. He was actually talking some immigration and made a final salutation there. Ted and I were both at that event. Crowd enthusiastic. Crowd I thought was in the palm of his hand. Certainly more traditional, but wholly more stable. I mean, stable. Like you could see this guy being the president of the United States.
Yeah, very believable.
I don't know what
as president.
filter people are looking through Trump at with this circus act that he's got.
Well, even
going
that
on.
very example you just played of Kasich's speech, there's literally, we can give you a counter message from the Trump rally, which is, he said, lock your doors because they're letting too many Syrian refugees around. So you have John Kasich saying, we're fine, you don't have to lock your doors, you don't have to close your windows. Trump's also saying, yes, you do lock your doors because he said, it's horrible, they're letting all this, and that got one of the biggest boos, not against Trump, but against what he was talking about, which was the Syrian refugee resettlement program of the whole rally yesterday.
Well, don't you think, Donald Trump picked, I think, one of the best issues he could have picked right out of the gate, right? Something that not just Republicans, but people in the middle, even some Democrats, the immigration issue. Now, you can argue that, he's been over the top with it, but it's something that resonates with people. Every time, you saw that last year, the San Francisco murder, things like that. Every time things like this happen, people get a little angrier. He picked the right issue out of the
Danny,
gate.
the thing about this thing is, if you take a look at polls before Trump's candidacy, you would find immigration on the bottom of their problems list, deep. If there were 20 issues, it would land on 16. Security was important, jobs, economy, blah, 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 that kind of thing. But immigration, and I used to say it on the radio all the time, you guys you can be the squeaky wheels and dominate talk radio with this immigration conversation, but the truth of the matter is that the general public is not that concerned. Something happened with this candidacy. It's almost as if he created a marketplace of worry with this whole thing. It's not that we don't want an immigration policy to be finally
Right.
consistently executed in this country, but it wasn't on the urgent list.
But I think
it was not on the urgent list until he started this. And for some reason, it's caught on as as opposed to an original word.
But right there, I think you get to part of what the phenomenon is here, which is you said the immigration, the folks who feel strong with that could dominate a talk radio conversation, but maybe not across the broader public. Well, again, every poll we've seen, Trump is doing horribly when you look ahead to the general election. His unfavorables are incredibly high. He makes Hillary Clinton look good, which isn't easy these days with the general public. And he's losing by a landslide in the November elections. But he's romping, or at least he's getting a plurality in the Republican primary. He's only getting, you only need a slice of a slice to win a primary, and he's still in that world.
And he mushed together all of those other issues that rank ahead of immigration. Jobs, security. He just linked it all back to immigration, and people started to say, yeah, like you said, yes, he's right. I think that's what he's done.
All right, it's fascinating. With the psychology of this is incredible. Reportedly, there are some Democrats running for office too. We'll talk about that when we come back.
Have you learned anything? What have you taken away from this campaign? Has it changed you?
Yes, absolutely it has. We have now won 16 states, caucuses and primaries, got millions of votes. What I think we have seen is that a whole lot of people, working people, young people, are saying, you know what, this country can do a whole lot better.
It was a great question you asked. What have you learned? I got to give Bernie Sanders credit. I don't buy his platform very much, but he's on a mission. His followers, wrong word, his constituents, his potential voters are on a mission. It's a different kind of mission, though, isn't it?
It is. There was a, it reminded me.
It's almost not connected.
It reminded me of Obama 08 in that there's I hate to say naive, and that's not necessarily fair to all the Bernie supporters, but just sort of a hope that is hard to imagine people having after the grinding, ugly politics of the last 15 years, right? When I was at the rally with his people, 7,000 people, mostly young crowd, bright-eyed, excited. You genuinely saw people who just saw, yes, he's gonna do it, and I won't say people thought it was going to be easy, but the path to them seemed like they thought it was pretty clear. Get this guy in there, and the thing a lot of us hardened political reporters, he might say cynics, is we always are saying, how are you going to get all this through a Republican Congress? And then he always says, we're going to have a political revolution, et cetera. Well, if he can't even win the primary,
I'm listening.
Oh well, I was just saying, if he can't even win the primary, where's his political revolution?
Your generation is more inclined to love this guy.
Oh, our Facebook feeds,
Absolutely.
our friends from college.
You look at it.
Do you have conversations with any of your peers outside the journalistic world saying, dude, wake up? I mean, there's a little bit of fantasy going on here.
I think Ted and I probably are both the same. I mean, we have a lot of friends who are jumping on board with this revolution of Bernie Sanders that, generally speaking, they have one or two issues that they really, really care about. They don't want us to hear our cynicism. They don't want to hear us say, oh, it takes the General Assembly to do X. It takes Congress to do X. They believe this.
Do they believe the government is a solution? The government should keep giving and giving and giving? Because a lot of what he's suggesting, he would talk about equity. He would think that his argument is that, well, the rich get richer, and the 1% are taking it all, and there's no, and he admits to being a socialist Democrat, but I'm worried about the ethic of a preponderance of the Bernie Sanders young voters out there, that they actually don't understand that they got to work for a living to get what they want.
Yeah.
I think there's some of that, but I think there's also, when you look at the damage done by bailing out all those big banks, nobody goes to jail. No, all the banks are still in business. Goldman Sachs is racking up profits now. People are saying, well, wait a minute. You prove that the government can act very fast to shore up the finances of these powerful institutions on Wall Street. We're struggling with student loans. The power of his message. If you take everything else out of the Bernie Sanders message and just leave free college tuition at public colleges / lower the rates on student loans, I think you'd still have a lot of this movement because it resonates so much, and I think it can be harder for people who are older than millennials who think, well, we figured out how to pay for college. It feels crushing to a lot of people, especially when it's not clear there's going to be jobs to help pay those loans.
Yeah, well, you know what? It also feels ridiculous to me, who's still continuing to pay college tuition. I'm in a place where I can certainly do that, and not for me, but for my daughter. And I think to myself, really, with my six-figure bill that will have accumulated after this whole thing, you want to give this store away? There's got to be, families need to have a stake in this game too.
Well, John Kasich had that great line the other day in that exchange with one of his supporters about, asking about college tuition, and he said, why didn't you go to community college? Look, that's a message that I think also resonates. You talk to people our age who are coming out of college with $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 in debt.
Yeah,
I remember being on at student government meetings when I was in college, 10 years ago or so. And I remember the president would come like once a semester and talk to us. And I was a little bit, had my reporter tin up. So I'd ask him, you just announced we're going up another 4%, over 50 grand, whatever, next year at the college I went to. How is that sustainable? And you'd get this pablum about, oh, well, it's fine. People don't really pay that, this, that, and the other thing. But in the end, that is the cost they're baking into the cake in higher education. It is unsustainable. And whether you think the community college answer like Kasich, the lower the rates, the free public tuition, they've created a system there that is not sustainable in the current economy.
Well, there's a bubble that looks like it's going to break. Hillary was in town too. We'll talk about, but before we change, the reason we're talking about Bernie here, at 7:30 we won't know. At midnight you will. He could win here.
Absolutely, yeah.
What's that say about us?
I think it's
or
just
part of us.
I think it goes to I think it shows independents don't like Hillary Clinton that much, and they're finding an appeal in Bernie Sanders, and independent, unaffiliated can vote in ours. And I think it also shows, the Clinton brand is not what it was 8 years ago when she did lose anyway, but won Rhode Island easily. It's pretty striking. And by the way, all our top Democrats are with Clinton over Sanders, and yet he might win. That's
exactly right. I mean, it's funny. I talked to Joe Palino, the former mayor of Providence, early this morning, and he was asking me what turnout looked like where I voted in Providence, and he reminded me, because I said, look, it seems like the turnout's going to be pretty high, and he reminded me, don't forget, 2008, it was all big turnout, all for Obama. Hillary won in a landslide. Joe, who's a big Clinton supporter, still, at least as of 10 o'clock this morning, thought it's going to be the same this time around.
Well, we'll see. By the way, just toss me Bill Clinton. We have one piece of audio from Bill from yesterday. In case you missed it, he was here.
I know both the candidates. I like them both. I served with them both. But if you want to get something done for America, you better make Hillary the next president. She's the best single change maker I've ever known in my life, and the only person suited now to both bring us back to shared prosperity with more jobs, higher incomes, and less inequality, and keep bad things from happening abroad from wrecking our progress here at home.
For the most part, talking to the Democratic establishment, however, in the state at that event yesterday.
Well,
Yes.
maybe it's not fair to say establishment there, because that brings up thoughts of, Jack Reed and Sheldon Whitehouse and Dave Cicilline in a cabal somewhere. I think he's talking to sort of loyal, consistent Democratic voters, the bulwark of those supermajorities in the General Assembly.
See, I don't think establishment's such a dirty word, but I get what you're saying. Donald Trump and maybe even Bernie Sanders together have made the word dirty. Just like politics is perceived as dirty. I don't see it that way.
Right, like lobbyists are dirty.
Loyalists and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is there doesn't seem like there's much new life there, and we'll see what the loyalists' turnout ends up being today. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about Hillary, and also Dan's got an incredible analysis of the Providence finances. Oops. Stay with us.
Every time I do an interview, the interviewer says, well, here's what Donald Trump called you today. Would you like to respond? I say, no, I don't want to respond. I will respond to what he says about everybody else. Immigrants, women, Muslims, John McCain, everybody else he's insulted, I will respond on their behalf. But I'm interested in what we can do together, not increasing his exposure on television.
By the way, there was a little bit of a stand-up act there from Hillary herself at Central Falls High School, which I was impressed with. Before I get your reaction to that, Lexi, Chris, my producer, reminds me, we didn't even mention Ted Cruz in this Republican conversation. You know why? Because he's nowhere to be found in Rhode Island and may not even get the 10% he needs to actually
That's
get
a big
delegate
risk.
count,
By the
right?
time people watch the late airings of your show, we'll know for sure. But you got to get 10% to get Republican delegates in Rhode Island, and Cruz has been very low profile. And Gio Ciccione, I talked to him briefly today. He said, they've been doing things a little under the radar, mailers reaching out to voters. He had confidence.
And of course, they denied that there's a real deal between Kasich and Cruz, that it's more or less a decision to pull resources in certain states. That makes me a little queasy in and of itself. I don't know, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah,
I hate voter and election manipulation. This is delegate manipulation. It's a light version.
You know,
of
to bring it local, it reminds you of the Buddy Cianci mayor's race in
Correct.
2014, right? Where
Right.
all these things were happening.
That's how they got Buddy.
That's
God
right,
rest his soul.
and that worked very successfully. I don't know that it works nationally, though.
On Hillary, decent enough crowd at Central Falls. Not the 1,000 people they pack into the high school. Why they had it there, I don't know what the message is.
Hot as hell. Oh my God.
Hot
it was
as
so
hell.
hot as hell.
Right.
Yeah.
Brutal.
Brutal.
Why do you
allowed
do
to
that
say
to
that?
people? I mean, why do they do that?
They need a spot. And Central Falls, they are focused on that Latino vote, so Central Falls is where they wanted to be.
So, 7:30 is a guess. Midnight, we'll know if you're right. Does she pull it out? In here. I mean, she's going to pull the nomination out.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, you mean Rhode Island,
here.
yeah. I'm going to punt. I'm not sure. I could see it either way.
I think she probably will. I think she probably will pull it out. I'm still going to say
By
that
single digits.
By very close. Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously Donald Trump is going to blow the doors off of everybody.
Yeah, that's just how high does he get.
Right.
The 67 is the number 10.
Yeah, then he gets extra delegates.
But let's remember, Trump will get a huge victory in a much smaller pool.
Yeah.
But then again, it'll be interesting to see how where the unaffiliated voters.
Yeah, I want to see the turnout. Does the Republican primary spike more than we might expect? Would be interesting to see.
There's a lot more to come in this presidential race. You have a final thought on that before I ask about Providence, real quick?
The Republican race, the Democratic one, it's painful for Bernie Sanders fans. I think it's close to a done deal at this point. Hillary gets the nomination, but the Republican race is just extraordinary. The fact that there is so much uncertainty as we talk, and it's almost May, and it's can he get to the convention, and I don't know if there's any good ending option for the Republicans at the moment.
No, there isn't. Hillary Clinton is just, if you have money you want to bet on this race, put it in on Hillary. Can I see this Providence headline real quick, Jess? I'd appreciate it if you pop this up. This is 12 ways Providence can solve its money problems, and in 90 seconds we're going to do it all, okay? This is a must-read on WPRI.com from Dan. Amongst the things, the Providence Water Supply Board ought to be sold, and maybe even Triggs Golf Course. Wow.
Yeah, huge. I mean, this report, which we've been waiting for months now, we knew that there would be a lot of recommendations. Honestly, I thought it was going to be more around make the colleges pay more, maybe raise taxes, ask the General Assembly for more, which is
That's
included.
just about all in there.
Right. However,
take holidays down to 12 from
Right.
15,
Right.
please, or 10 from 13,
Yeah.
whatever, for the
but
public employees.
the big headlines, selling assets potentially, potentially going to a parking tax on garages downtown, maybe charging people more, a tax on admissions to events like PPAC or at the Dunk. I mean, those are all things, one, that take legislative approval, which is going to be very difficult. But those are big things that if that moves forward for the next year, 2, 3 years, people are going to be angry.
We'll have to ask you to come back next week or,
Yeah.
or send after this whole thing rolls out. Mayor Alorza has his presentation on this tomorrow
Budget
night.
tomorrow,
Monday
yeah.
night. You have a quick thought on this debacle that's going on in Providence and funding?
It's just depressing, right? The city just floats along, bounces along the bottom. There's a lot of folks still who make a compelling case against filing for bankruptcy because you'd lock in more tax increases, you'd have to shut down a lot of services, but you still hear from folks who say then you're going to be a zombie city. That's what some people are calling it, that just is unable to move forward.
50-50 that I get from people. Some people say terrible idea bankruptcy, some people say great idea.
It's kind of like Sanders or Trump. Final word when we come back. We will have post-primary analysis, easy for me to say, tomorrow with Brown University, taking a look at polling data and the actual results tomorrow night here. See you on the radio at noon tomorrow. Good night.